Mr. Albrecht, you now have 20 minutes to cross-examine Turretinfan. You may begin when you're ready.
All right, Turretinfan, would you say that Francis Turretin held to the notion of Sola Scriptura?
Yes.
Great. Seeing as to how both you and Francis Turretin both held to this teaching, would you say that that you're right about Mary not remaining a virgin her whole life, and that Francis Turretin was indeed incorrect on this?
Yes.
I guess my next question would be, which one of you is causing the disunity and the division here? Hypothetically speaking, of course, since the real Turretin isn't around anymore.
Right. Yeah, I wouldn't divide fellowship over that. It's not something I would divide fellowship over. If one of my Presbyterian brethren decided that he wanted to believe that she perpetually remained a virgin, I wouldn't divide fellowship over that. And Turretin, of course, only thought she was probably a virgin, but even if he were more dogmatic as maybe Calvin seemed to be at times, I still wouldn't divide fellowship with someone over that issue. And I don't know of any churches that do, except Rome.
Okay, great. Then I guess let me ask it differently. Am I incorrect then? I guess the question I'm really asking is not really disfellowship, but does this issue cause disunity? Because I believe that's the crux of the question.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's a difference of opinion about some subject, but everyone has differences of opinions on different subjects.
All right. Okay. Let me see. I guess I'll ask you a different question. In regards to Mary being a perpetual virgin, something that the real Turretin believed, and I think, at least I think he was pretty clear, forceful on his belief there. Would you say that, basing themselves on the principle of Sola Scriptura, would you say that James White of Alpha and Omega is right in this topic, or would the great reformer Francis Turretin have been right, basing themselves on Sola Scriptura on this topic?
You're asking which one is on the perpetual, assuming for the sake of the argument that Turretin held to it as opposed to simply thinking that it was probably correct, which is my recollection of his works on that particular subject. But speaking hypothetically and saying, let's say he said definitely, I'm 100% sure she was a virgin her whole life, and Dr. White says that she wasn't. We evaluate Scripture, see whose answer is in accordance with the Holy Scripture, and if the Scripture gives an answer, then we will side with the person whose Scripture favors. In this case, after much examination, we've come to the conclusion, and on this point, most Protestants would agree that, in fact, Mary did not remain a virgin her whole life.
All right, okay. I guess going back to the whole point of disfellowship, we're not really dealing much with that, but I guess would it be correct to say that on this particular topic, that yourself and the original Turretin, Francis Turretin, are not united? Would it be correct on this topic at least?
As I pointed out before, I don't think having a different opinion about a historical fact is a lack of unity, but we don't have the same opinion on this. We have a difference of opinion.
So you're pretty much telling me that basing yourself on Sola Scriptura, as the real Francis Turretin did, that you two are not that there is not disunity between you two in regards to this topic?
What I'm saying is that a difference of opinion about a historical fact, one that's not, one that isn't essential to the faith, is not usually referred to as a lack of unity, but just simply a difference of opinion.
Well, I don't mean a lack of unity in regards to the whole of the Christian faith, or whether one individual doesn't have their salvation or not. My main question is, basing ourselves on the doctrine of Sola Scriptura, which Francis Turretin based himself upon, and which you base yourself upon, as far as I can see, you two are not united on this particular topic that Turretin did write, I believe is a few pages worth. So I'm just asking if I'm correct to say that basing ourselves on this particular topic, that there is disunity between you two. Am I correct?
And there's really two parts to the answer to that. The first one is he based his opinion not on the teaching of Scripture on the subject in a positive sense. He based, as far as the positive testimony to her virginity, he based that on tradition. And he didn't insist that it was a doctrine or dogma. But as I said before, the other part of the question is, although we have a difference of opinion on this, I don't call that difference of opinion a lack of unity. Although, if you mean that people have differences of opinion, and you're going to consider that disunity, then I guess that makes for an interesting standard for our discussion. But so be it.
So what you're pretty much telling me, I guess this would be an interesting question. You're pretty much telling me that Turretin based his opinion on Mary remaining a virgin throughout her life upon tradition and not upon Scripture. Is that what you're saying?
The positive testimony that he cited on the issue? Yeah, I recently blogged about this, actually, and I provided a quotation from the real Francis Turretin on the subject.
Right. Okay. So you don't believe that based upon Sola Scriptura that Turretin came to this conclusion then?
He didn't come to the conclusion that Scripture teaches she was perpetually a virgin. He never says that.
So he came to this conclusion based upon the tradition of the fathers?
Well, let me see if I can quote you his exact words here.
Sure.
He says, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You can go ahead and quote. That's no problem.
He states that this is not expressly declared in Scripture, but it is yet piously believed with human faith from the consent of the ancient church. We have better access now to the historical data, but that was how he begins this discussion.
And in Francis Turretin's mind, would it be incorrect to say that the ancient church composed the apostles whose teachings are in Scripture?
What he's referencing in particular is Jerome, which is somewhat later than the apostles. But
all right, okay. So he is not basing himself on Sola Scriptura in regards to this. Is that what you're saying? That's my only question.
Yeah, his conclusion of perpetual virginity is not based on Scripture alone.
Interesting. All right. Turretinfan, was Francis Turretin correct when he believed in his teaching on the sacraments?
Is he? Well, as far as I can recall, I mean, I don't have access to every last, at the tip of my tongue. I couldn't repeat back to you everything that he said on the sacraments.
Okay, I can narrow the question down. I can narrow it down now. Is it a fact that the Lord's Supper and baptism are both sacraments? In
Yes.
your opinion, at least. They are sacraments, yes.
Yes.
All right. So I suppose, again, we go back to the topic of Sola Scriptura, since Francis Turretin held to that. Is it not a prime example that since Francis held to Sola Scriptura and he believed in sacramental theology, as opposed to many modern-day Calvinists, that this evolution of Sola Scriptura has indeed caused much splintering of views?
I'm sorry. Maybe I've misunderstood your question. You were pointing out that I agree with Turretin that the sacraments of the Lord's Supper and baptism are sacraments, and it's your opinion that some people don't believe that those are sacraments?
That is correct. My question is, since Francis Turretin specifically referred to the Scripture as teaching sacramental theology, and today the majority of individuals within differing Protestant denominations and even within Calvinism do not hold to this and think it is indeed erroneous, is this not a prime example that Sola Scriptura has not only evolved but caused a splintering of views?
No, I don't think that's the result of Sola Scriptura. There have been differences over what sacramental theology is all throughout Christian history. It's not specifically related to Sola Scriptura, and there's differences of opinion among what you would tend, like for example, even medieval theologians talking about the sacraments held to various views on them and what exactly constitutes a sacrament and how sacraments are related to the realities they represent.
All right, Turretinfan, I got another question for you. Since you don't believe, evidently, that Sola Scriptura causes disunity and confusion, what do you make of the fact that within your own apologetics group, that you're part of Alpha and Omega Ministries, that you have a myriad, well, maybe not a myriad, but you have some conflicting theologies? For instance, let me get to the crux of the question. James Swan, for instance, doesn't consider himself to be a Reformed Baptist like James White is. Is that not disunity? If there's an individual that is part of a group of Christ lovers that opposes another Christ lover in some instance, both people claim to hold to the principle of Sola Scriptura, but there's a stumbling block that obviously prevents one person from completely subscribing to the other person's views. Is this not disunity in some sense?
Yeah, it's a very there's a denominational disunity, and at the same time, there's that very interesting unity that exists, which allows them to be on the same blogging team, as you pointed out.
All right, between James Swan and James White, since you point out that there's a denominational disunity, is this not a prime example of, nevertheless, disunity that is brought about pretty much by their view of Sola Scriptura, since they base their authority upon the Scriptures alone?
As I pointed out in my opening